we've identified them all. We've identified the source archives for them all. And in a few cases where the archives didn't have complete material, we got very, very lucky and had one of those backroom deals with a guy in the valley who had a collection. And I went to his unair-conditioned vault, and he handed me 7 reels, including an original camera negative for an Arcadian Maid, a Mary Pickford film, where half of the camera negative was at the Library of Congress and half was missing. This was the missing half. Material that probably had managed to walk away from the Museum of Modern Art in the mid-30s, where they had incomplete material. Somebody maybe borrowed something, who knows? Anyway, thank God for collectors, because we got some of that from a private collector. And for those films that are totally lost, we're working with the Library of Congress on scanning the paper prints, and the little mini doc explained, of course, and this is a room of cognoscenti, so I think everybody here knows about the paper prints, but all of the 1908s are lost, and so we're reconstructing them through Katie Pratt's miraculous work with the digital scans.
Well, I can say that I actually had never seen a paper print or a picture of a paper print before. That was absolutely amazing to see what that had done. So yeah, so do we want to talk anymore? I see Donna Hill has said she found the films astonishing, just incredible quality, and were all of these from paper prints?
No, it was a mix. The one that I'm very proud of, I'm proud of all of them, but if you saw the film called At the Altar, that is a very, very important early biograph, because it's the first one where Griffith uses a close-up of an object to advance the plot. But also it's a film where the Museum of Modern Art had 35mm camera negative for almost all of the interiors, but had none of the exteriors. So when they would screen it, it just looked like, you know, the policeman went running to the rescue, leaving one room, and suddenly, with no explanation, Bobby Heron, not the policeman, rushes into the church to save the day. And all of the exteriors of the policeman's running and tripping over a chicken and breaking his ankle, and part of the narrative plot, we were able to put back in. Also, the villain's suicide was missing from the MoMA material. So for the first time, people can see this very important early biograph in totality. There is some difference between the quality of the image in the 35mm, where you can literally see Max Sennett sideburns drawn in and his wrinkles. He's one of the immigrants eating spaghetti at the table in the opening shot, versus the paper prints, the exteriors that look pretty darn good, but you're not noticing every single stitch on the heroine's dress. So I was very, very pleased about that. The Mary Pickford film, A Child's Impulse, was entirely from 35mm, not from paper print. But the material that MoMA had on this and the Pickford Foundation had was in certain scenes so badly degraded that you couldn't see anything at all. It was like looking at snow, or it was like looking at blackness. And this was one of the films that we got a separate copy from the guy in the valley. And so we ended up not using any MoMA material at all, simply our privately purchased material. So you can look at the magnificent work that Katie did and see the amount of detail and care that Billy Bitzer's photography provided. I mean, this man took pride in his work, and everybody here knows that silent films were not flickery and run too fast, and they weren't fuzzy. Paper prints up till now, people have been able to see them, but what they saw were photochemical reproduction, 16 millimeter, that were done in the late 50s, early 60s. And you project that on a screen and it's like looking through a lens that had been smeared with Vaseline. You know, you're just going, what? So to be able to see the adventures of Dolly in all of its pristine glory, you know, there's where we owe a real debt of thanks to David Pierce and Mike Michon and Heather Linville and the folks at the Library of Congress who, you know, have been so generous with sharing the material and working with us to try and get the scanner to work and shipping the files to us, etc. So it's a mix, Donna, of 35 millimeter paper prints and half and half.
Well, I would also think that it makes a big difference with the technology that we have nowadays, with between the extra fine scanners, you know, that can do great work. But then also, I'm curious about the software. Now, I don't know if, you know, it's supposed to be like the secret herbs and spices. You don't talk about what you have. But I know that we have a Diamond software here in Niles, and it's definitely helped doing some of the stabilization and things like that. Is there any particular software that you think is especially helpful?
We started out using Adobe Premiere, believe it or not. The way we really started out was funding the software that Library of Congress had invested in called Metastitch. But we paid for a year for a wonderful guy by the name of Dan Wingate to spend a year in Culpeper, Virginia, trying to get the scanning machine to work and trying to get the software to work. At the end of that year, he decided that we could do better with this off-the-shelf product, Adobe Premiere, than we were using with the, you know, the privately coded and built Metastitch to grab the frame with the 4 images in it, separate them. We wish we could be doing every single frame separately, but that's what they had. And remember, paper prints don't have sprockets to advance. It's technically a very challenging thing. Then Katie Pratt, who you should unmute, whoever's in charge of unmuting people, she will be able to name.
She can unmute herself, actually.
Okay, Katie, unmute yourself if you're nearby and listening. She did her homework and found a product. It was expensive, but it has improved the efficiency and skill of what she can do even more in terms of identifying what's a scratch versus what's a legitimate movement across the screen. I think we all remember when we saw that little mini documentary with the Gloria Swanson, Rudolph Valentino film, where the documentarian or the restorationist said, look, I managed to erase a dog that was running across the street. The software thought that was a mistake, whereas there was really a dog running across the street. He should have been there. And so Katie goes frame by frame, I am not kidding you, and finds where the scratches are. Katie, can you turn your sound on and tell us?
Yeah, it's on now. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. What's the name of that wonderful product?
It's called PF Clean.
PF Clean.
Mm-hmm.
We can't recommend it highly enough. If you've got, you know, 5-6 figures in the bank, you too can have PF Clean. But it's, you know, saves us a tremendous amount of time, and she's been a happy woman since we bought that license.
Very much so.
Yeah, I hear if you have the right tools, you know, it's amazing what you can do. So yeah. Is there anything, Katie, you want to mention that just we'll give you a chance now, even if we have a disembodied voice? Go ahead.
Well, we're still working on getting the best workflow and trying to figure out, you know, PF Clean versus Adobe Premiere, which one works better in different circumstances. But other than just learning as we go, everything's been really working out well.
And if everybody's audio is on, which I know it's, you know, your speakers' microphones are not on, but if they were, we would all be clapping for you, Katie, because I mean, your work is really remarkable and amazing. And We've never had as many shares as we got this week when we put up that little mini documentary where Katie showed what she does. I mean, people, it's the closest I've ever been to going viral, short of, you know, sneezing on somebody. So love and props to her. She's amazing.
Well, I'm glad you're on board, Katie, because yeah, it's good for you to, if you get at least see or hear. I've been hearing, everybody's been saying, oh my gosh, these films, how they look like they were made yesterday. It just, people have been really floored.
And wait till we get to 1912 where there are true close-ups. I mean, I thought, oh my gosh, I'll never forget in Lillian and Dorothy Gish's first film, and everybody knows the name of it and I'm suddenly blanking on it. Elmer Booth plays the brother and you can see the makeup line, just white, pancake here, and then his neck is without makeup. And, you know, you just, holy cow, the stuff you see when you see it in 35 millimeter as it was meant to be seen originally. It's
Unseen Enemy. Thank you, Donna. Unseen Enemy.
Thank you. Thank you, Donna. It was the slattern maid with the gun poking through the vent hole. Poor Lillian and Dorothy. They were terrified.
All right. Well, part of the reason we were doing the muting thing is we honestly didn't know how many people would show up and how many people might want to monopolize, you know, the conversation. So that's part of the reason why we're doing this, because I want to make sure that Tracey has a chance to say everything she wants to say. But that doesn't preclude us from, you know, offering that opportunity in a little bit. Okay, so why don't you tell us what you've done so far and then what you have, you know, your other plans that you have coming up.
Well, in terms of the biographs, we really had a huge break on the project when the pandemic hit. Because after years of sweet talking and lunches and writing checks and negotiations, MoMA started sending us negatives. And they, of course, have the majority of the material. Library of Congress has the paper prints for all of the biographs, just about. And so hundreds or at least dozens of films into 1908 and 1909 we're getting from Library of Congress. And the Pickford biographs, the biographs that Mary Pickford acquired negatives when she was trying to snap them all up, are housed at the Library of Congress. But otherwise, except for a scattered few at George Eastman Museum, British BFI, and UCLA, the vast majority are at MoMA. And as soon as the pandemic hit, no more shipping. And the first 5 they had shipped to us, unfortunately, were the ones that we already had copies of from having bought from the guy in the Valley. Their reasoning was, well, now you can compare. It's like, okay, but I really want the stuff that we don't have. But it's coming. They think in 2021 they'll be open again. Similarly, the good folks at the Library of Congress, of course, were stuck at home for a long period of time. So what we did, thinking, well, we're probably not going to be getting fresh material until people can get back in the building. Library of Congress had a project whereby they had scanned and assembled a number of wonderful William S. Hart films. They didn't stabilize them, they didn't clean them up, but they found the best source material and put them together and had these wonderful scans, and the films were screened last October at Pordenone. So I said, we've got the folks and we've got the time and we're running short of biograph material. How's about sending us some of those William S. Harts? And again, David Pierce and Mike Michon went above and beyond and sent somebody in just separately with a mask on just to get those digital files and FedEx them to us. And Katie is working on them. In addition, she is working on Douglas Fairbanks' second feature film, which nobody since 1915 has seen intact, Double Trouble. It's a wonderful film. And we got two reels, a two-reel cut down from Brazil with Portuguese intertitles that, God bless it, it had, if there were 20 frames missing from a shot on the American print, those 20 frames were buried in the Brazilian print and vice versa. One was 16 millimeter, the other was 35. So Katie had to do a lot of work sort of reframing and capturing the edges of a frame, the static edges where it was cut off in the 16 millimeter, but it was there in the 35. And she has reconstructed that film. We're just on the verge. Next week, we're going to have our initial viewing of it internally in-house to see, make sure the intertitle placements, et cetera, are correct, because we found the original intertitle sheets typed up in an archive when Triangle Films was sold. And then Katie will clean it up, and that's going to come out on Blu-ray, either with another Fairbanks film that's never been out on DVD or Blu-ray called Mr. Fix-It from the George Eastman Museum, or with one of the William S. Harts. And that has to do with timing of who gets what, where to us. So that will be released, but it won't be our first Blu-ray release. We are going to be releasing a feature film that I cannot yet name because it's going to premiere on TCM in the end of November, and until TCM announces it, I'm supposed to be mum. It's a mid-20s film with 3 major stars, one of whom was not yet a major star and just had a small part, but it was his first film appearance. And the other 2 stars are names everybody on this Zoom call will recognize. And it was, our source material was 16 millimeter. Katie made it look like 35. I'm telling you, we could read the map on the wall behind our hero's head. And you'll notice I'm not saying who the hero is. And with that release will come a second feature film that I also can't name. That's a sound film that relates to the first film, and one of the biographs. It will be A Child's Impulse. And I'd like to point out that Donald Sosin is the musician responsible. He's tasked with scoring the entirety of the films that we're going to be issuing with the Biograph Project. So there will be a uniformity of style and skill level, and I promise never to release a silent film with a rock and roll score.
You don't want to be Giorgio Moroder?
Not naming names, I'm just saying we're going to do it with the music that was appropriate for the era. And if you want to play rock with it, turn down our music, and
we'll keep it simple that way. All right. Well,
put
okay,
on
so,
Three Dog Night.
So I have a question that I probably could have just asked my husband, but so Douglas Fairbanks and William S. Hart both worked for Biograph. I mean,
No, neither worked for Biograph.
Okay,
Douglas Fairbanks and William S. Hart both worked for Triangle.
Okay.
They have nothing to do with Biograph, but because we couldn't get any material from MoMA or the Library of Congress, we got the William S. Hart scans because they were there. Double Trouble, I have to tell you, we have been working on that since before 2014. It took years to get those 2 reels out of the Brazilian archive. The lovely folks at the Library of Congress got somebody to lean on somebody and offer to put it in a diplomatic pouch. First, it was we have to wait because the World Cup was in Brazil, so we had to wait for the World Cup to be over. I think there have been many World Cups since then, but we did not get it for quite a period of time. And then we discovered that somebody had, on the sly, struck a positive from the camera negative around 1970. And our scan of the camera negative had significant degradation. And we said, once we realized that one of the usual suspects who tended to dupe films and re-edit them and distribute them supposedly as his own, had done this, then we had to work to get the positive that had been scanned back in the day. And it's the same source material, but 50 years difference. And what a difference it made. So that stalled the project, but it gave us much better material. And the little documentary shows you some side-by-side shots, I think, or some before and after of what it looked like, what we thought we were going to be working with, and then in the end, what we ended up working with, because it hadn't degraded as much. So I started, before the Biograph Project, the idea of creating Film Preservation Society originally was so that I could see some Douglas Fairbanks films that otherwise were unavailable. So we funded the restoration of The Half-Breed and The Good Bad Man, and then Kino released them. And then, golly, you know what? That was really gratifying. And so then I got ambitious and we started to work on Double Trouble. And then I clearly was, you know, smoking the jazz cabbage or something, because then I said, I want to see every single biograph. Why don't I do this? And so it's a 20-year project. I mean, it's certainly going to take time, but it is happening, and we're starting to finally see real results.
Well, that's exciting. I mean, there's people who are like students of film like myself, where I'm constantly learning new things. Many of the people on this group here, they know all about where Fairbanks worked or where Hart worked, what have you, but I'm still like, oh, this person was here. I mean, just like the fact that Bronco Billy Anderson worked at Biograph before he ended up being
At
part of
SNA.
it, you know, I mean,
Yeah, well, I mean, we're all film nerds, but we have our niches.
Yeah.
And I'm obsessive about Doug Fairbanks. I mean, I can look at a photograph if it's between 1915 and 1920, or excuse me, and 1930, and probably, you know, place it to the month.
Wow.
Oh no, he didn't buy that jacket until July that year. But you know, when you're in a Zoom meeting like this that are full of cognoscenti, I know people are going to be able to top anything I know or say on most of the topics. But that's what makes this so wonderful, that when I grew up, you know, I went to high school. My last year of high school, I was living in a small town in Wisconsin. Everybody in Wisconsin could talk to you if you were going to talk about the football game or the baseball game or, you know, the Badgers, but there was nobody who cared about silent films. I just grew up very lonely, and I'm so grateful to live in an era now where we can all find each other, this narrow interest. But here we all are. Larry Smith. I mean, I know people's names. I see those faces, and it's like, where's Jenny? People that you know, you become part of oh, there she is. You become part of a family, and just because of this common passion. And I'm grateful. I mean, I wish I could have lived in 1910. And if I had a time machine, you know, yes, I would go back and kill baby Hitler, but I also would be, you know, going to the exchanges and getting posters.
Well, I think, but
getting the lost Fairbanks films.
But at that time, though, that wasn't necessarily seen as something you needed to do. I mean, what would be film history? What was important about that kind of thing? It's what's happening now. So.
It was ephemera, it was expendable, and that's why the work we're doing. My father died a couple of years ago, but before he died, you know, I said, why are you doing this? And I said, Dad, there are 700 people to whom this will mean a tremendous amount. And I will grant you 500 of them haven't been born yet. But it's a tiny sliver of posterity that cares about this. But that sliver is going to go on as long as we have history. And this is the beginning of something that was tremendously important. And if we forget our history, shame on us. So.
Okay. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. Now we've been talking, I think we've gotten the main gist of everything we wanted to get out there. So if people would like to ask questions, I know there's some kind of a raise your hand feature, but you can also just type your name in the chat and that I'll know to call on you. And then in addition, if you don't want to talk specifically, you can also just you can, if you don't want to ask questions, you can just type a question in here. So let me just go through a few things here. Eric Curlin says Katie's work is outstanding. That's wonderful. Okay, John Marsalis, why don't you get on board and unmute yourself and go ahead and say some of the things that you were typing here in chat. There you are.
Hi, Tracey, you're doing God's work, I have to say, on both the Fairbanks and the biographs. My goal is to get every biograph film that exists in 16mm, and there are hundreds of them. And if you look in chat, you know, it's astonishing that, you know, only like about 3% of the Vitagraph features survive, and at about, you know, 95 or 96% of the Griffith biographs survive, and much of it because of paper prints. If you look in chat, I'm aware of only 16 lost Griffith biographs.
Oh,
and
no, they're not all lost.
Well, that was my question. If you glance at the list in chat, are you aware of any?
Sure, I can tell you right now, we have already restored Mr. Jones at the Ball.
Okay.
And wasn't it one of the ones that we put up for folks to see?
Is that one of the ones?
Yeah, Mr. Jones at the Ball
Okay.
is up there. That is, it's not truly the first Jones comedy. A Smoked Husband was, but the characters had different names, Mr. and Mrs. Bibbs. So Mr. Jones at the Ball was the first one with Compson and Florence Lawrence as Mr. and Mrs. Jones. And the order in which we're restoring these things sort of had to do with the order in which the Library of Congress felt the paper prints were, you know, in good enough shape to be scanned. So we didn't start with Adventures of Dolly and go numerically through them. So Mr. Jones at the Ball is one that was done. I can tell you Monday morning in a Coney Island police court will be done. We haven't scanned the paper print yet. The Golden Glitter exists in 35mm. I think if memory serves me, it's at MoMA, but I've seen it in 35. I don't even think, with the digital age, don't think 16mm anymore. Think seeing it at 35 quality or better if possible. So we will have, as I just looking at your list, I haven't gotten incredibly granular in 1912, 1913 beyond just my native affection for that era, because we're not getting that material yet from MoMA. So I know almost all are not lost. As a matter of fact, there's a biograph that we are going to restore that was never released because the censors cut it off. And I'm blanking on the name of it because, you know, why would I prep for a meeting? But the narrative of the story is dad abandons the family with the little girl and a mom, and he goes off to become a brigand and a robber. Years later, the girl has grown up to be lovely. I think it was Mary Pickford. And dad comes back not knowing that the people he's robbing and the young woman he's kidnapped is his own daughter. And there is a very distinct threat of sexual assault, which would have constituted incest. Of course, the heroic ending, we managed, the girl gets away. In fact, the father disguises himself as the girl and goes out and gets shot by his fellow brigands rather than have her die. Nobody has seen it outside of whoever saw it in an archive because the censor said, no way, Jose. And that negative survives. So I will loop back to you, but as far as I know, just about all of the the biographs exist in one form or another once you incorporate the paper prints. Now, there's a question of some of the missing shots. But again, that's where we got incredibly lucky. The material that we got from the guy in the valley had sections that were missing from MoMA's material. And we think what happened was, back in the days of fractured flickers, somebody came around and said, can I borrow these reels? And they took some stuff and struck a gorgeous positive, fine-grained positive from it, from the negative, and never returned to the source material. And so the shots that are missing in MoMA's collection on certain films happen to be the very shots that we have from this private acquisition. So all I can beg is, you guys, everybody knows that guy who knows that guy who's got a collection under his bed. Just ask on our behalf. We'll pay. We'll pay to get this material, and we'll do whatever we can. But I'll keep this list, or if somebody could email it to me. I'm not clever enough to cut and paste off of a Zoom chat. And I will get back with you, John, on this specific list. But I think we're going to be able to tell you that 99% of it we've got.
That's great. A related question, I mean, from the Pickford material, a lot of the Pickford material I know was re-released under alternate titles.
Yeah.
I have a print of one that I still haven't figured out what it is, called Savage Princess, that looks like a biograph, and it says directly in a fancy 1920s art title, says
yes. They took one real biographs with Pickford, because she of course was so popular, and recut them into two reelers. So for Arcadian Maid, for example, Library of Congress had the first reel of this one reel film that had been stretched, and we had the second reel. But we are working very, very hard to find the original intertitles. In the case of a lot of the Pickfords, the intertitles, the original biograph intertitles, were all cut out separately and thrown on a separate reel, so we can scan that reel. In some instances, the paper print has the intertitles. Everything from Midsummer 1912 on, they changed the copyright mechanism, so it was no longer scanning a paper print, but instead was the first frame of every shot and every intertitle, all typed up, and then the frame was clipped, including demonstrating the tinting, in sort of a paper copyright document. So films that you saw, you know, our beloved David Shepard would issue biographs, and he would make up the intertitles. And where, if a little more research had been available to him, he would have been able to find the originals. Anytime we're putting a intertitle that's not original on, where we're writing the biograph voice, we're putting a FPS bug in the lower right corner. Now, every biograph you see on the 6 that we put up for you for this particular session, we've got the bug on all of them because we didn't want anybody to steal them and throw them on YouTube. But if it's 1908, we're writing the intertitles. We have to. If it's 1912, we've got the intertitles, guaranteed. The originals are there. And if you go to the Biograph Project on Facebook and scroll way back to the early entries, you'll see pictures I took of the original title cards that MoMA still has for the 1912, 1913 biographs. They're black text on white, and then they flipped it, you know, printed the negative. And to be able to hold an intertitle from the transformation of Mike in your hands was such a thrill. So we're being very, very careful to research and do everything we can to get the intertitles, even if it costs us double. If we have to scan a lesser copy to get the original intertitles and then separately scan a pristine 35mm negative, to get the shots looking gorgeous, we're making that investment to do it that way.
So
I give long answers, I'm sorry.
No, we need to be sorry. That's what this is all about.
Great answer. Thank you.
So Mary and John said that the film that you were talking about, Tracey, is The Heart of an Indian.
I think that was the reference that John was making to a reissued biograph in the 20s.
No, I understand. Michael Elf says that Savage Princess is Fate's Interception.
Oh, okay.
But The Heart of an Indian would be the one that was questionable with the censors and didn't get released. That's what they're saying.
I have to look it up. I'm sorry. I can look it up pretty quickly, but I don't think it was The Heart of an Indian because there weren't any Indians in the story. But the Mary Pickford, of course, played lots of Indians in these biographs, and it's a lot of fun to see. I see a question coming up about how long on average does it take to restore one reel. I'm going to ask Katie to put her audio on again, because that's a huge range based on the original source material. Katie, can you give us the long and the short of how long it takes you to restore a single reel?
I can. I would say 2 days I spend usually just stabilizing it, because that takes quite a bit of time, and it depends on, you know, the condition of the scan to begin with. And then the other 3 days, if it's in good shape, I just spend cleaning it up. But if it's in bad shape, I could spend weeks cleaning up, you know, a very short amount of film.
Yeah. The mystery film that I'm not naming with the 3 stars, she was able to do in about a month, and that was a 5-reel film. The Double Trouble has been consuming more than one person for more than 1 year.
We've kind of been going back and forth to it. We haven't, you know, just made that our one project either. So that's made it take a little bit longer. And I have fun while I'm working on all of this. So of course I make it take a little bit longer probably than it should.
Nothing wrong with making things just right. That's wonderful.
I see Sam Gill's got a question about the non-biograph and the post-1913 biograph films.
Yes.
Every silent film academic at Pordenone, they are so immersed in this that the Griffith biographs are like, oh, okay, they've seen them. And they're all going, how about those, you know, the other ones? And the answer is, right now, this is, the funding for this project comes from 2 sources. One is whenever somebody signs up on smile.amazon.com and designates Film Preservation Society as their charity of choice. Last quarter, we got $25. But if everybody did it, I'm sure that will be more. Otherwise, it's coming out of money as I earn it. So I used to, you know, put my kids through college, and then the kids graduated from college, and it's a 20-year project because I slowly need to earn it. On the other hand, if somebody handed us $1 million, I'm not sure we could do it any faster. 1 woman can have a baby in 9 months, but 2 women can't do it in 4.5. We are, the rate limiting step right now is getting the material from the archives. And because of the pandemic, that's very, very slow. And if we had 2 Katies, I think we could work more quickly. And someday maybe we'll be able to afford 2 Katies. But I'm not asking anybody else for their money for this, because first of all, we're coming into hard times, right? I mean, this pandemic has hit our economy. And if you've got spare nickels to spare, I know you've probably got friends that are having trouble making the rent. And a fair amount of my disposable income goes to my friends that are in trouble too. And it's my quirky dream. And if I really believe it, I should pony up myself and not expect other people to pay for my dream. So I'm not doing a GoFundMe or a Kickstarter or any of those things. I just, we hope to make some money, probably not a profit, but recover, lose money more slowly by issuing some of these things on Blu-ray. When we finish all the 1908s, that will go out as a single boxed set of Blu-rays. And then in theory, 5 years later, another set for the 1909s, et cetera. And no, you never make a profit doing that, which is why all of the companies like Kino need to have an evergreen moneymaker like the Keaton films and the Chaplin films, so that they can put out the rarer and the less popular stuff. But we will recover some of the money. And so when the day comes that these Blu-rays are coming out, they will be a little more expensive than if you were going, to Walmart and buying a normal Blu-ray, because that's what we want to help funding. So the short answer, there's no short answer. The long answer is probably not the non-Griffith biographs. Probably what we will continue to fund after that will have to do with my eclectic interests. So I'd like to get some of the Dorothy Gish triangles for Donna Hill. I want to get those William S. Harts out there. I want to find more of the lost Doug Fairbankses, God help us. But we've left behind, hopefully, a mechanism whereby other people can now take the software and the scanning machine and get the paper prints that they want or are interested in scanned, because we've industrialized the process. So.
Wow. So just to clarify, so you're saying that it's not, the Biograph Project is not a 501c3 nonprofit.
We are.
You are.
Yeah,
okay.
We're a nonprofit. Yeah, we're a 501c3. So the money I give it to myself, I can write off for tax purposes. And if anybody wants to send us a check, you can get a tax write-off on that. And if any, we may sell a Blu-ray and make it, more expensive than a normal Blu-ray, and then some portion of that purchase is tax deductible. And we're doing, for example, because we're an American 501c3, Lobster Films and Serge Bromberg are doing the Méliès project, where they're working hard to restore all these Méliès. And they're getting grants and awards from sundry organizations. Those organizations can't give that to a French company, Lobster Films, but they can give it to us. We then write a check for the identical amount. We don't take a skim off the top or anything to Serge, because that meets our mission. And then we generate a tax letter for those donors. And so we the first year after Bob Bircher died, we did the same thing for Cinecon, because Cinecon was not yet a 501c3. Mm-hmm. So we kind of fronted them because it met our mission of exhibiting silent films. So.
All right. And so let's see, it says here, would be great if we could donate to the project on the website. Looked, but don't see the option. Do you have a donation link?
Not yet, but we are going to be very soon putting up a web store, and that web store will be selling the first Blu-ray release. And we can get together with the board and decide if we want to also put in a donate now button. I welcome it. I don't openly solicit it because, again, times are hard. People's money is precious to them. And, I'm every so often I get, somebody sends a check, a check for $50 or $100 will just come to the house because somebody looked us up. And that's great. And we're so grateful, but we're not openly out here saying, give us money so we can do this. We're just doing it.
Well, I think just letting you know, coming from a nonprofit, put the donation button on your website. You're not making any, you're not twisting anybody's arm. It's their
Okay,
choice.
you're right. I should.
They
I loved Essie's comment. If they can buy a strawberry dress, damn it, they can donate.
Well, I'm just saying is it's if you do Venmo and do the PayPal, people have to know how to deal with that. There's a lot of people say, you know what, I don't want to deal with their fees. I want to just mail you the check, but and then have directly below that have your address on there. Let them do it now.
We just put up the website very, very recently. We've been so busy doing the work that I didn't take the time to build the fluff, but God bless Katie. Those youngsters, they know how to do that computer stuff. So she put it up there for me and put up pictures. And thank you, Donna Hill. The new website is beautiful. That's all Katie Pratt's good taste and hard work.
So let me just close up. I think we'll just have a couple more things, but did you want to say anything about specifically about the films that people can still watch for another, what, 6 hours and 11 minutes? Is there anything that you'd like to talk about? Any of them, the significance of any of them, or why? I mean, it sounds like Mr. Jones that was a big deal, and you said A Smoked Husband was the first film. Anything?
No, it was, Smoked Husband was I think, it or Mr. Jones at the Ball, I'd have to look, was the first Mr. and Mrs. Jones film where they were identified as Mr. and Mrs. Jones. And I don't think we have both of them up there. I think we only have Mr. Jones at the Ball.
We have Smoked Husband too.
Oh, we do? Well, good for us.
You're generous. You're very generous.
What I love about Smoked Husband is if you've seen all of the 1908 biographs, and I saw them in 1997 in the Griffith Project at Pordenone. Don't ring me, I'm on the call. That's my son. Hold on a second. Honey, I gotta call you back. I'm doing a Zoom meeting. I love you. Okay. You'll see Bobby Harron constantly wearing this little bellhop uniform. And he's the delivery boy, he's the bellhop. And then one day around 1910, he just shoots up and outgrows it and his wrists are sticking out. And that was the end of the bellhop uniform. But I love the fact that he comes into the COD package to collect the money to see a 14-year-old Bobby Harron there. And I don't know if we put up the Florence Lawrence film where it was her first film for Biograph, where she's being beaten by her nasty.
I think so. Just to remind you, we showed the Adventures of Dolly,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Jones at the Ball, A Smoked Husband, At the Altar, The Gibson Goddess, and A Child's Impulse.
Okay, good. So we didn't do the first Florence Lawrence one. A Gibson Goddess is fun. It's not in great shape. That was from 35 millimeter. So you'd think, oh, that would be pristine. But it's not in great shape. And we're going to be ultimately going back to LOC and maybe doing some paper print scanning to fill in missing frames. Katie tells me that the curtains that kind of blinked and winked, that wasn't from our software. That had to do with warping of the original source material and an artifact that came about with the scanning. But Gibson Goddess was from the Pickford collection because she's in the background. She's one of the background people on the deck out there where Marion Leonard is the star of that particular film. Arcadian Maid was from 35 millimeter. That was our material, not MoMA's. And of course, it's as charming as can be. You know, you can't go wrong with Mary Pickford. But when you see that opening scene and you can see all the detail in the room, you know, the vamp and she's throwing a party and she's dropping the rose petals on the hero's head to seduce him. It's just astonishing how much detail you can see, and that was in that original material. And of course, Donald Sosin's scores enhance everything. The 1908s they're pretty early, they're pretty primitive, but it's, to me, fascinating to see how good Adventures of Dolly is. That very first film. He's putting the camera in the water and the barrel comes towards us. He's putting the camera up so you can see the kidnapper coming through the field, and at the same time somebody working with a sickle and not seeing him because the growth in the field is in the way. How it would be possible to kidnap a child and be so close to somebody who could stop it but still get away with it. The amount of detail that was in that paper print, I think, makes it really worth seeing. And the music of Donald Sosin enhances everything. He tells me he has in The Adventures of Dolly something that was called the Dolly Suite that was taken from some classical music. I am too musically illiterate to know. I mean, I know when they play In the Good Old Summertime, I can get those jokes, but I don't have a good enough classical reference. And the way the music changes when it's Mary Pickford versus when it's the Vamp, it's just really, really the love and care that the technical skills of people like Katie, the people at the Library of Congress who did the original scanning work for us of the paper prints, and of talented people like Donald Sosin, really bring us back to what things were like then, and it's a privilege to get to see them as they were meant to be seen. So.
Okay, so I know, see, Michael says, Michael House says, did the cop from At the Altar go on to become a Keystone Cop? Did he influence Max Sennett with his performance?
No, but what you'll see throughout all these early biographs is Max Sennett desperately trying to create Keystone comedies, and D.W. Griffith going, oh, come on, knock it off. So you will see proto Max Sennett throughout these early films. In A Smoked Husband, he is doing the classic French comedian, the Max Linder sort of character. He's one of the people up on the roof smoking a cigarette, and before our hero falls in to the bucket of paint. And you'll see Max Sennett in other films that we didn't share with you today. One of them was called Chord of Life, 1909, where the evil Sicilian guy puts the baby in the basket and hangs it from the third floor window, and then cuts the rope such that you can't, the minute you open the window, the kid's gonna die. Well, Max Sennett's one of the cops in that scene. Max Sennett is constantly trying to do comedy bits in early biographs, and very early in the game, Griffith goes, oh God, let me get this guy out of my hair. Comedy, I don't like comedy. And Max Sennett is directing comedies at Biograph, separate from Griffith, who's directing more and more dramas and fewer comedies. So you will see Keystone comedies coming out of Biograph before Sennett forms Keystone. But no, that cop that tripped over the chicken and broke his leg, that was a dramatic part and not a funny cop. But there are stupid cop chases and stuff in these things, and you'll see Max Sennett as one of the comic characters wooing the Gibson goddess in the Gibson Goddess, and that's very Sennett-like and not so Griffith-like in its direction. Each person comes in turn and does their comic bit and then goes off the screen. You'll see in time that Griffith is more inclined to have multiple things happening in the frame at once, whereas Max Sennett is linear in his directing. There are some biographs where if we study carefully, we'll go, wait a moment, how could Griffith have been directing that particular comic scene when, according to the records, that very same day, he's on location in Cutterback doing this drama. And it's clear that Mac directed a scene within a Griffith biograph, and you can just see it. It's got Max Sennett all over it. You know, one person comes and the next and the next. So some of the earliest biographs, we restored one where Griffith only directed one shot. The majority of it had been directed before Adventures of Dolly, and then he did a pickup exterior after Adventures of Dolly. So we restored that film because it was called The Deceived Slumming Party, because Griffith directed a shot in it. And when you see it, it'll be very clear which shot was Griffith's and what was essentially somebody filming a stage routine and not doing anything interesting with the actors or the camera.
So Larry asks, why do you think Biograph never made a serial?
I think it just wasn't Griffith's jam. And Griffith was the guy running the show once he started being successful. Serials were not in his wheelhouse. And Larry is right in that he mentioned to me the other day that Biograph was the only studio that did not release a serial. Everybody else did. So were there any other unreleased titles? As far as I know, no. So the censorship thing came about pretty early in film production, but for the most part, the censors did not censor biographs because they were honestly superior to the other films that were being produced at the same time by other studios and were felt to be more elevated. And so, no, at least not in the records I've explored so far. I haven't fully finished going through all of the microfilm material that's at MoMA because their library is closed. But I got an awful lot of stuff when I was there, and I didn't see a lot of evidence except for that one that didn't get released, which you guys will be able to see.
All right, so we're at an hour and change. We got a couple of minutes for just a couple more questions. So if you have any interest in saying a question or typing a question, this is your chance. Otherwise, we're going to be bringing to a close. Looks like Catherine Fuller is asking why there are relatively few Biograph films novelized in Motion Picture Story Magazine. Have you found any evidence that they held out?
No, I've not done even sort of an analysis to see proportionately if biographs were featured less than, say, Edison or Biograph. I just know every time they were, I was, carefully printing and Xeroxing the pages because it gave me stills. That magazine evolved, as you know, into more of a classic fanzine. Did they become Photoplay, or I can't remember what they became. But Biograph, I will tell you this, they were not good, and they were the last of all the studios to share the actors' names. And over and over and over again, in the back of these magazines, Motion Picture, Moving Picture World, Nickelodeon, Motion Picture Story Magazine, people are writing letters in saying, who was the blonde girl in this film? Who was the fellow in that film? And the person answering the questions would always say, would give the name if they knew it, if they figured it out. And often they weren't able to do so. And they would always say, Biograph just won't share, won't give us that information. But I cannot tell you that they were featured less than others, but it sounds like Catherine Fuller has looked at that question and feels that they were represented less than the other studios. So
it's pretty amazing how people find their lane, as it were, and they really research it and they figure out these different things.
Well, and again, here's our gratitude, our really profound gratitude to David Pierce. He's now Library of Congress, but years ago, I ran into him in Pordenone and he said, I've got this idea, we're going to scan all of these trade magazines and then later fan magazines, and put them all up on a relational database and archive so everybody can get to them. As a biographer, I can't tell you the difference it made to me not to have to sit at hours at a time at the Herrick Library going through the trades, but instead to be able to digitally search for Fairbanks's name. It made the process so much more efficient. And the same thing being true of newspapers with newspaper archives and other tools has really made our lives easier, and we owe a real debt of gratitude, particularly to David Pierce and the Lantern Media Project. But then there are people who will write books where they don't have a filter. Every single narrative story that comes out, they include, and it's like, yeah, okay, you found that, but is it relevant? Is it interesting? Does it matter? And there are some books I've read that would have made wonderful articles, in the Atlantic or the New Yorker or wherever, that got puffed out to a book because of this wealth of material, and the people didn't have the art of censoring themselves. But somebody on Goodreads said that my book had too many informative footnotes, too much information, they said. And we don't care what the names of the musicians were who played on Doug's sets, who then played at his funerals. And I said, that's why it was in a footnote. It's not in the main body of the book, but too much information.
Somebody wants to know that.
Yeah, well, people in this room want to know, golly, give us more. But it's, you can't please everybody. I learned that.
You never know what things will lead to, you start off in one path and then you divert. I mean, we had a situation where there was deaccessioned movie cameras over at the Academy of Sciences, and they're gone. They no longer were physically there. We actually have several of them that they came through happenstance. But David Keene supplied the Academy of Sciences information. I said, why are you giving them information about cameras that they don't even have anymore?
Because some researcher will want that.
That's what he said. He said
Yeah.
they're going to find it because it's been in the archives. People are going to seek them out. They're going to say, we don't have them anymore, but here's some information that we can share with you. And now they're going to know. And also, by the way, they're over at the Silent Film Museum in Niles. And I hadn't even thought, it blew my mind to even think, like, I wouldn't even have thought that a museum would want information when they don't physically have the item anymore. But
I would sell my grandmother into a human trafficking ring for a 1910 Pathé, and I like the old gal. I mean, seriously, these things are very exciting to us, and the idea that they would deaccession this kind of material makes me bless the collectors all the more.
We're saying thank you for the footnotes. That's what we're really saying.
Yeah, and my book, if somebody hasn't read it, is The First King of Hollywood. It came out in 2015. It's a biography of Doug Sr. And I think paperbacks are still available on the primary market on Amazon, but the hardcovers are people sell them on eBay, and I have boxes of them because I bought a bunch of boxes for book signings and events, and we may end up selling some of those for a fundraiser, and we'll see if Katie can put something clever up on the website. So if you don't have The First King of Hollywood, wait a few weeks and we'll put something up and you can buy it there.
I'll get a few copies for our museum store to have on hand, but we're happy to help you with any kind of fundraiser. If we can do a Northern California push, we're happy to.
Oh, we just need there to be the after times. I mean,
yes.
it's so hard.
Okay, so let's see. Let me make sure we catch everything here. Sam Gill says that Biograph was not cooperating very much with the Motion Picture Story magazine, which later became known as Motion Picture Magazine. So they just took story out of there. Thank you, Sam. And then let's see. What beach and amusement park was Gibson Goddess filmed at? The picture was so clear that I could see a merry-go-round turning in the background in the beginning scene.
Yes. I don't know, but I know the guy who knows. meaning there is a gentleman who is working on a book on Pickford locations. And he has found for me the very window, which still exists in the building from which the Sicilian villain dangled the baby in that basket. In Fort Lee, so many scenes were filmed there. And one of the opening shot in the Court of Life, which I'm sorry, it wasn't one of the ones we put up for you because we haven't finished restoring it, is the same window that Mary Pickford is looking in the New York Cat, and the same window from a different angle Lillian Gish is walking past when they did the inner city in the Musketeers of Pig Alley. He is able to show you maps and say, okay, here's the alley where they filmed Musketeers. Here's, you see the striped awning for the candy store. You see it in this film. And for his book, we have been providing him with high quality TIFF files, because to date, he's only had, you know, the 16 millimeter or what he could pull off of YouTube. And so sequentially, as we restore the films, we're giving him the shots he's requesting. And last week he requested the Gibson Goddess. And so if he doesn't have the answer, he's going to have it soon.
Well, he's actually on here. If this is not a This Is Your Life, but he's actually on this call. So why don't you unmute yourself and tell us what you typed out here.
Oh, Highlands Beach, New Jersey. See, Chris.
Okay, Chris. I saw C. Maliski. Okay.
Yeah.
Chris, can you unmute yourself?
Oh, he says he can't speak right now. He can only chat. So his microphone.
Okay. All right. Well, let me tell him. Okay. I was trying to give him a chance.
Yeah. Oh, he's marvelous.
So evidently that was filmed at Highlands Beach, New Jersey. So that's the location. And now everybody knows his name. Perhaps he can type his email address or a website or anything so they can get in touch with him.
He has a marvelous
Chris
website.
for the Mary Pickford locations, because it sounds like you're going to get some people asking questions. So, okay, he says right here, it's marypickfordcollection.blogspot.com.
Yeah.
So marypickfordcollection.blogspot.com.
And we know that the some of the biographs that were shot in California, we know some of those locations, like the Pigeon Farm in As It Is in Life, and the shots done at the beach at Santa Monica, or the Pacific Palisades, and you can identify those spots. But Chris drives out. He's in the Northeast, and so we'll drive to Cutterback and Villain, Fort Lee, and get those shots. There is in two different biographs so far, we've found the same Revolutionary War monument in both the Court of Life and in Father Gets in the Game. No, Father Gets in, yes, no, not Father Gets in the Game, but there's the one where the tramp replaces Father. Katie will remind me the title. Father Gets in the Game was filmed in Central Park in that big fountain that you see all the time in movies like The Producers and such. And periodically we will put up on the Biograph Project page photographs of the location now and the location then, which is how Chris found us. And he's got shots of the park, theme parks in New Jersey where chases were filmed. It's just astonishing. And when this is all over, I am bound and determined to take Katie Pratt, who deserves it if nobody else does, and other geek friends of mine, and do some field trips around the Northeast and go to these spots. And because it's fun. I mean, I went to Central Park and took a picture of that fountain. It was the weekend after Kobe Bryant was killed in the plane crash. And so where Max Sennett had actually stood was blocked by a little memorial thing. But the rest of the picture, it just looked exactly the same. And to think that these things are still there, that you know, 110, 112 years ago, Griffith, Billy Bitzer was there cranking a camera. It's wonderful.
That is pretty amazing. All right, well, I think that since we're at an hour and 15 minutes, I think it's a good time for us to bring it to a close. I want to thank Tracey so much for all your information. I know that people really appreciate it. Now, the chat information, that I'll include that as part of a post. So you'll be able to go to our website and get the link to this video and then have that chat. That won't be part of the YouTube channel. That's why I'm saying is it's really good to go to our initial website and our archived programs, our archived online program archive. Anyway, that you'll be able to see
at midnight.
Yes. Yes, definitely. Yes, for sure. Definitely make sure to watch all these films before they go away. And I'm glad to see it. Okay, it sounds like we're doing all right then. Great. Thank you all very much for coming.
Thank you everybody for having me. It was a real honor.
All right.